Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Russia's defense ministry has appointed a new commander to lead its forces in Ukraine in the latest shakeup of Russia's military command structure in the wake of devastating battlefield losses. Russian Army General Valery Gerasimov replaces Sergei Surovikin, who will be demoted after just 3 months as commander. Gerasimov played key roles in Russia's seizure of Crimea from Ukraine in 2014 and helped lead Russian forces in Syria, supporting President Bashar al-Assad. Meanwhile, President Volodymyr Zelensky of Ukraine denied claims that Russian forces led by Wagner Group mercenaries have seized control of the eastern city of Soledar, where Russia claims to have killed about 500 Ukrainian soldiers. In Washington, D.C., protesters gathered outside the White House Wednesday to call on President Biden to close the prison at the U.S. Naval Base in Guantanamo Bay, Cuba. Demonstrators wore orange jumpsuits and black hoods over their heads, marking the 21st anniversary of the reopening of the notorious prison to house hundreds of Muslim men and boys who were captured overseas and handed over to the U.S. 35 men remain imprisoned at Guantanamo today. In an open letter to President Biden, the ACLU, the Center for Constitutional Rights, and over 150 other groups wrote, quote, "The Guantanamo detention facility was designed specifically to evade legal constraints, and Bush administration officials incubated torture there. Guantanamo continues to cause escalating and profound damage to the aging and increasingly ill men still detained indefinitely there, most without charge, and none having received a fair trial," they wrote. In other news from the nation's capital, members of the group Code Pink disrupted a Brookings Institute defense policy talk with Congressmember Adam Smith Wednesday to call for a diplomatic end to the Ukraine war.
Democrats have to step forward, have to put the pressure on the Biden administration and say we need negotiations, not more war.
The real security, national security is addressing the climate crisis, getting people housed, and not focusing on weapons. We have $880 billion going to war. We need our social services.
Alabama's Republican Attorney General said Wednesday pregnant people could be criminally prosecuted if they take medication to terminate a pregnancy. His comments came just days after the Food and Drug Administration announced retail and mail-order pharmacies can now sell the abortion pill mifepristone directly to patients with a prescription. Medication abortions account for more than half of all U.S. abortions. On Capitol Hill, the Republican-led House Wednesday approved legislation that would require reproductive care providers to work to preserve the life of the infant born after a failed attempt at an abortion, a situation that's exceedingly rare. House Republicans also approved a resolution condemning what they called attacks on anti-abortion groups and churches. Neither piece of legislation is expected to advance in the Democratic-controlled Senate. Here in New York, dozens of Republican Party officials called publicly Wednesday for newly elected Congressmember George Santos to resign. Santos won November's election to represent New York's 3rd congressional district in Queens and Long Island after fabricating large portions of his resume and life history. This is Nassau County Republican Committee Chairman Joseph Cairo.
He has no place in the Nassau County Republican Committee, nor should he serve in public service, nor as an elected official. He's not welcome here at Republican headquarters for meetings or at any of our events. As I said, he's disgraced the House of Representatives, and we do not consider him one of our congresspeople.
George Santos has steadfastly refused to resign. He was confronted by reporters on Capitol Hill Wednesday.
Congressman Santos, will you resign?
I will not.
Will you step down?
I will not.
Republican House Speaker Kevin McCarthy on Wednesday rejected calls that he take action against Santos, saying voters would have another chance 2 years from now to elect a new representative.
In America today, you're innocent till proven guilty. So just because somebody doesn't like the press you have, it's not me that can oversay what the voters say. The voters are the power. The voters made the decision, and he has the right to serve. If there is something that rises to the occasion that he did something wrong, then we'll deal with that at that time.
House Speaker McCarthy also signaled Santos remains eligible to serve on House committees. His defense of Santos came after he confirmed that 3 prominent Democratic Congress members, Adam Schiff, Eric Swalwell, and Ilhan Omar, would be barred from serving on House committees. Congresswoman Omar said she believes McCarthy singled her out over her religious faith, telling HuffPost, quote, "I do not actually think that he has a reason outside of me being Muslim and thinking I should not be," she said. Illinois' Democratic Governor J.B. Pritzker signed legislation this week banning military-style assault weapons and high-capacity magazines. Pritzker said on Twitter, quote, "I'm tired of living in a world where a mass shooting needs a title so you know which one we're referring to." The White House welcomed the news Wednesday.
The president continues to urge other states to join: California, New Jersey, Connecticut, Hawaii, Maryland, Massachusetts, New York, Delaware, Washington, D.C., and now Illinois to ban assault weapons at the state level to save lives.
In another win for gun control advocates, the U.S. Supreme Court left in place for now a New York law that restricts guns in many public places. The law was enacted following a June Supreme Court ruling that struck down a New York law limiting the carrying of concealed handguns outside the home. In Afghanistan, the Islamic State claimed responsibility for an explosion that killed at least 5 people near the foreign ministry Wednesday. Dozens more were injured. It was the second major attack in Kabul since the start of 2023. After headlines, we'll go to Afghanistan to speak with the head of the Norwegian Refugee Council, Jan Egeland. Israeli forces shot and killed a Palestinian man as he was standing on the roof of his own home in occupied East Jerusalem. The killing came during a raid on the Kalangia refugee camp. Samir Aslan was 41 years old, father of 8. He was the 3rd Palestinian to be killed by Israeli forces in under 24 hours, following the deaths of 21-year-old Ahmed Abu Junaid and 19-year-old Sanad Mohammed Smasra in the occupied West Bank. Israel's killed at least 7 Palestinians since the start of the year, including 3 children. In Peru, the death toll from anti-government protests has risen to 48 following the ouster and arrest of leftist former President Pedro Castillo last month. Health officials said 37 civilians and 6 police officers were injured Wednesday after fresh clashes erupted in the city of Cusco. Meanwhile, thousands of people in the city of Juliaca held a mass funeral procession for 17 people killed Monday after security forces opened fire on protesters calling on Castillo's successor, Dina Boluarte, to resign. Among the dead was 17-year-old Yamilet Arequipa, a psychology student and volunteer at a shelter for abandoned animals who was fatally shot in the abdomen. Her mother spoke to reporters Wednesday.
The assassin, Dina. Why doesn't she have blood on her face? My young daughter had such a bright future ahead. She wanted to visit many countries. She was a psychologist.
In Mexico, journalists in the southern state of Guerrero rallied Wednesday to demand the release of 3 of their colleagues who were kidnapped in late December. Jesus Pinto Alegre, Fernando Moreno Villegas, and Alan Garcia Aguilar work for the outlet Escenario Calentano. In a video posted to social media, 2 of the journalists can be seen with their hands and feet chained. Meanwhile, authorities in Mexico City arrested 11 people in connection with the attempted assassination of prominent television and radio host Ciro Gomez Leva in a drive-by shooting December 15th. In climate news, the United Arab Emirates has named the CEO of one of the world's biggest oil companies to preside over the COP28 United Nations Climate Summit when it convenes in Dubai later this year. Sultan Ahmed Al Jaber heads the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. Responding to his appointment, the anti-poverty charity Action Aid said, quote, "This appointment goes beyond putting the fox in charge of the hen house. The UN Climate Summit is supposed to be a space where the world holds polluters to account, but increasingly it's being hijacked by those with opposing interests," they said. NBC News is reporting aides to President Biden have uncovered at least one additional batch of classified documents in a separate undisclosed location. This comes after news broke Monday that a first batch of classified materials were found in November in an office used by Biden after his vice presidency. CNN reported the initial documents contained intelligence related to Ukraine, Iran, and the UK. Those documents were handed over to the National Archives. In sports news, Buffalo Bills defensive player Damar Hamlin has been released from the hospital to continue his recovery at home. His release came 9 days after he suffered a cardiac arrest on the field and twice had to be resuscitated during a Monday Night Football game against the Cincinnati Bengals. In recent years, the NFL has faced increased scrutiny over player safety as more research links the full contact sport with concussion-related traumatic brain injury and other negative health outcomes. And in labor news here in New York City, over 7,000 nurses at Montefiore Bronx and Mount Sinai Hospital have returned to work, ending a 3-day strike after reaching tentative deals with the hospitals on improving staffing ratios. The New York State Nurses Association union had already won wage increases, but striking nurses at the two hospitals said the ongoing staffing shortages severely impacted patient care. You can see our interview yesterday with one of the striking nurses at democracynow.org. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now! Co-host Nermeen Sheikh. Hi, Nermeen.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to our listeners and viewers across the country and around the world.